and welcome to Inside View. Joining me today is Kelli Fraguero, who is the Executive Director for the Resource Connection, or is there a better title for you?
The title is Chief Administrative Director.
Chief Administrative Director. My apologies. Why are titles so long?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. You don't get any more money with them. So.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah. Well, in my case, I'm part of a management team instead of an executive director, so I'm just kind of the person that signs checks as part of that team. So we had to come up with some kind of important name.
Well, it sounds lofty.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm jealous. I'm just an editor.
I'll give it to you.
So tell me this, the Resource Connection, it seems like there are so many different things that it does sometimes, and I don't even know what all of those things are, but what is the Resource Connection?
So the Resource Connection is a multi-service agency, and we do a lot of things in Calaveras and Amador County. The Resource Connection is responsible for the food bank program, which has been in the newspaper so often and doing wonderful things. Head Start in Calaveras County is a Resource Connection program. WIC in both Amador and Calaveras is a Resource Connection program. And then what we call Child Care Resource and Referral, which is a child care subsidy program, is under the Resource Connection, and it serves both Calaveras and Amador. And then the Crisis Center, which I'm responsible for, in addition to my part on the leadership team, is under the Resource Connection.
So tons of very different things.
We do all kinds of different things, and it seems like every day we're coming up with something, some gap we see, and trying to fill it in the community. So
just right off, if people do want to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that?
If they want to get in touch with me about things that we're discussing tonight, they would call 754-1300, which is the Crisis Center number. If they want to get in touch with the administration office and find out more about the Resource Connection as a whole, they can call 754-3114.
Okay. And we're going to go over a variety of topics tonight, focusing kind of on domestic violence, but there are a lot of other things that you're working on too, a housing program, and then of course there's a sexual assault response team and so on and so forth, and just the day-to-day helping women in crisis. But before we get into all of those topics, I wanted to introduce you to those viewers who don't know who you are, because I have had you on before.
Yes.
And so first of all, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Twainhart.
In Twainhart?
In Tuolumne County.
So you're kind of going across the river.
I am. I have been adopted by Calaveras County, I think. I've been coming over here to work for probably 17 years.
Do you still live over in Tuolumne?
I do.
All right, so you did stick to your roots then.
I did.
With where you live.
Yeah.
Okay. How long does it take you to get here?
It takes about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic.
I don't know if I could do that, Kelli.
It's a great way to let go of work before you get home and to plan your day. I also listen to book radio, so I get to hear stories. And sometimes I pull into the parking lot, not quite ready to get out of the car because it's really exciting.
So do you have like on your iPhone? Do you have an app, or is it a?
It's Sirius Radio, the satellite radio.
Oh.
Has a station with audiobooks on it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I have found that a commute in the morning does clear my head quite a bit and gets me focused. When I had a 2-minute commute, I would arrive at work and I was still sleepy sometimes. So.
Well, and it's really good when you serve a community the way we serve the community in Calaveras, to be able to put some distance between that community and yourself when you're off, so that you're not running into people in the grocery store that want to talk about, whatever their issues are, domestic violence, sexual assault, and you don't have to really be really good at setting that boundary of saying, I'm sorry, I'm not at work, because that's really, really difficult. So I don't run into that as much as some of my staff do.
I imagine, I think you're the lucky one there.
I do too.
For sure. Okay, so you grew up over there, and did you know at a young age that you wanted to be in this type of a job?
No.
No. What did you think you were going to do?
I thought I was going to be a veterinarian.
Oh, really?
But, I did work at a vet for quite a while, and I found that when animals are injured and hurt, it affects me so severely that I can't really function. Okay, I get, kind of red level angry about that, and I realized that it was not healthy for me. So I think kind of the perfect alternative is helping people. Everybody has their stuff. I still get frustrated and angry when people are abused, but I can deal with it in a more objective way than if it's animals.
When did it become evident to you that you just weren't cut out to be a vet?
after about 3 years at the veterinary hospital, when I was dreaming about it and taking it home every day, couldn't let it go, and stomach was upset over things that I saw, and it wasn't healthy for me.
How old were you at that time?
21, I think.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah.
So then, where did you go from there?
Okay, this road goes all over
well,
the place.
take me on it. I'm along for the ride.
I actually moved to LA, and I worked for a financial planning firm, completely different world, different culture, and didn't really like that. Came back, and I went back to work for the vet for a little while, but then I ended up working for the Calaveras Visitors Bureau.
The CVB, okay.
Yeah, as the executive director.
So you led the Visitors Bureau?
Yes.
For how long?
I did that for 5 years.
5 years, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite another twist. So you've done helping animals, you've done financial planning, and then you've done marketing, basically.
Yes.
Marketing Calaveras County.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you still lived over in
Yes.
Tuolumne. Okay. So 5 years of that, then what happened?
And then I felt like I needed to do something. I wanted to do something that I thought would help change the world. There were things that I was seeing that I didn't like, and inequities that weren't making sense to me. And so my plan was to volunteer for a domestic violence program. And I was going to do that in Tuolumne County. And then I can't recall who it was. Some woman came to me and said, that there's a position open for the director of the Calaveras Women's Crisis Center. And I thought, well, I've never done that before, but why not? I'll try. I had been head of a nonprofit organization. I was familiar with boards and writing grants, and they hadn't had a director for 8 months, and so they interviewed me, and I got the job.
Were you totally stoked on it? Were you kind of like,
I was
okay?
Terrified.
Okay. Because that's a big.
It's a big difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I love it. I've been there for 11 years now, and it's learning every day. That's what I like about it. It's different, and I do believe that myself and my staff are doing something every day to make the world a little bit better. We may not see it that day, but I think that we are.
Tell me about your staff.
I have 13 amazing women that work for me. The thrift store is also part of the crisis center and the resource connection, so I'm counting my ladies there, the manager. The advocates at the center are the most compassionate women I've ever met. They are patient, and they really do their best every day to bend over backwards to help women and men who are victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. They cry, they laugh, they're all a little crazy. I think you have to be crazy to do this work because, it's hard. It's hard seeing what people who are supposed to love and take care of each other can do to each other, when a relationship goes bad. So, they're out there and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get somebody out of a violent relationship and back on the road to, having a peaceful, fulfilling life. They're amazing.
How do you kind of support each other when, let's say, one of your staff members goes through a really difficult case or situation?
We eat.
The chocolate ice cream?
Everything. We eat a lot. We have lots of potlucks. We always have cookies or something in the kitchen. We laugh a lot. As with any kind of organization or business that deals with traumatic incidents or violent incidents, we're inappropriate sometimes, in the way that we deal with things. We just blurt it out, things that probably if someone was in a regular office that would not be okay to hear, but you need to be able to say it. We talk it through, we do cry, we make sure that at least once every other month we're, watching a funny video instead of having a staff meeting. We play games, we go for walks. It's just whatever, sometimes we dance.
Is there enough light at the end of the tunnel to keep everyone going?
I think so. I think one person is enough light. And I think that we have made a difference for a lot more than one person.
You are the head, so you kind of have to make sure that everything keeps going and people do their jobs and the help is provided to all these men and women. What does your job entail?
So my job is to, well, in my mind, my first priority is to take care of my staff, to make sure that they have what they need to be able to do their job, whether it's training about laws or different kinds of counseling techniques, that we have a proper environment, that they feel supported, and that I'm always reminding them about self-care, and you have to take care of yourself, and you have to take vacation, and you have to do all those things. Beyond that, there is training of the staff. There's grants that have to be written, so we don't get any kind of tax money or anything like that. We have to write grants for all of our, so it's all donations, and I have to apply for all the money that we get. So our budget for the crisis center is around $850,000 a year, so I have to make sure we have that money. And then, going out and doing things like this, making sure that the community is aware of what we're doing, making sure that we have relationships with other agencies, such as CalWorks and the DA's office and the Sheriff's Department and the Police Department. We provide trainings for those organizations. So, doing that outreach and making sure that all the information is getting out there.
That just seems a little bit terrifying to not know if your money's going to be there each year.
Well, yeah.
I mean, so is there like a pretty reliable source for the? Okay.
The CalEMA, which is the California Emergency Management Agency, has domestic violence and sexual assault funding that they allocate for each county every year. You have to apply for it, and you have to be able to show that you are doing all the things that they require in order to get the money. But if you do those things, you're going to get some sort of funding. With the economy and the budget and the cuts that go on in government, the funding goes up and down, or it stays the same for 10 years in a row, so we have to deal with that. But those kinds of grants, we have two, one specifically for domestic violence, one specifically for sexual assault, that are kind of the core, and it's pretty much guaranteed unless we really mess up. I really mess up, that it will be there. And then everything else we get is kind of gravy. So if there's something that staff really want to do, like, for instance, hey, this is a great segue to the housing piece. There was, they're identifying a need for beyond shelter. We do have a domestic violence shelter, but when families move out of shelter, often they can't find housing or can't afford housing. So staff said, we need to find some money to be able to provide this kind of support beyond our shelter. And so wrote a grant for HUD, which is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and requested money to provide housing for up to 12 months in an apartment or a house for families leaving shelter, and we got that. So now we have expanded our program a little bit, and if a family is ready, and we can find a place for them that fits within those guidelines for HUD, then we can pay for housing for them for up to 12 months. So.
Who's using that so far? Are any families taking advantage of it?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think how many families. We've had families do it for a little while, and then and the goal is for them to sustain their own housing at the end of the 12 months or 6 months or whenever they can. So there's a housing coordinator piece that goes along where they help educate them about how to find a property and how to do a budget and how to do all that. So I'm trying to think. I should have brought that. I think we've had 5 families go through that, and currently, let's see, we've had 5 original ones. I think 3 have gone off and have gotten housing on their own, so they were either able to maintain the apartment on their own because they were able to find a job, or they were able to find some other kind of subsidy for the housing. And then I think we still have 3 that are left on the program. So.
And is the funding limited, or is it as many families as need?
It is limited to 6 families per year, and that's based on kind of larger families. So if we get individuals, that money's going to go a little further. So I have to kind of anticipate how many families we're going to serve and what size they're going to be, which is a little difficult. Yeah. And I was very wrong. So our budget actually is going to go further. I thought we were going to have more larger families, but we've had more individuals or like a single parent with a child. So
you said the support services continue. What support services do you offer these families who are going through these tough times?
So we talk about. Are you talking about just in the transitional housing or altogether?
Well, let's say to start, like if they're actually in the shelter themselves.
Okay. So if somebody is in a domestic violence situation that they want to get out of, not everybody in a domestic violence situation is ready to leave, and then we respect that. So that's their choice. And they come to us and ask for shelter. We put them in our shelter, and they have to follow certain rules. And part of that is that they attend domestic violence groups, that we do some counseling with them. We do have 2 therapists on staff, that if they have children, the children are also getting counseling. So what we're trying to do is identify, why they made the choices they did, identify what abuse is, because sometimes people just don't recognize that, calling a person names is hurtful, and that's domestic violence, just as much as physical domestic violence is. So we do some education around that. And at that point, we can talk to them about doing a restraining order if they need to. If they need to do the divorce process, we can help them with that. Try to get them hooked up with as many services monetarily as they are eligible for, say through CalWorks, like food stamps and cash aid and those kind of things, just making sure that they're really stable, identifying their support systems outside of the program. Everybody gets a case manager, so that's one person that they work with. And as a group, weekly we meet and discuss, what's going on with this person, what's their barriers. At a certain point, when we feel like they're ready to move on, and that could be 30 days or it could be 90 days or it could be a little longer, we say, okay, so we're planning to move you on to transitional housing, and that's when, they kind of freak out. Oh my gosh, I'm not ready. Yes, you're ready. And, we do some budgeting. We talk to them about how to find a place to live, and part of the responsibility is for them to help us identify that property for them. And we go through looking at the house with them, the checklist of, what you do with a landlord and how to communicate with the landlord and what the rules are for the property, and then we sign a lease and we pay their rent until they're able to do it, or 12 months, whichever comes first. So during that time, they still, they have the housing coordinator who is going to visit them weekly. She's going to come into the house and she's going to look at, how the housekeeping is going so that we don't make the landlords mad. Mm-hmm. Talk about if they're looking for a job, how is that going, and hook them up with motherhood job training if that needs to happen. And find out what other barriers they're having to sustaining their own housing. And we may ask at that point that they still continue to go to domestic violence support groups if we feel like still they're kind of maybe going back in that direction. And it just depends on the individual.
And I imagine it's hard because some of these people who've experienced these things, even though it's terrible, they do want to go back.
Of course, they love that person.
They love that person. But I mean, for someone who's never experienced it, and we've talked about this before, it's hard to make sense of that.
It is. It's very hard to make sense of it. I think the person that explained it best to me is it's like an addiction. You do something even though you know it's not good for you, because in some way it's fulfilling some need for you. So a lot of the people we see that are in domestic violence situations grew up in a household that had domestic violence. So they see something as a child, and you know that when you're a child, that brain development is super important in the first 5 years. So if you're seeing violence or somebody being emotionally abusive, you're thinking that that's normal. So, and that's how love is shown and acceptance is shown, and that's how you get attention. So you're going to look for that in your relationship. And you're either going to become the victim or you're going to become the batterer in those situations, and you're going to look for those types of relationships. And regardless of whether someone can get it through your head that that's not normal, it still feels normal. And walking away from it is failure. We see so many victims of domestic violence that just say, I don't want to get him or her in trouble. I just want to make them understand it, they're hurting me, and then it'll be all better. Or if I just do better, if I'm more attractive, if I clean the house better, if I'm a better mom, a better dad, I get a better job, it's going to make the relationship okay. So they put it all on themselves, and they keep doing this thing that they know is bad for them logically, but somehow in their heart, it's what they grew up with. It's what's normal. It's what's right. And I think it's confusing, especially when they're getting the message from someone else. Like, this is not okay. What do you mean it's not okay? This is what my parents did. So it's a very confusing dynamic, and I have done this for 11 years, and I still don't really understand it.
Yeah.
I just get that this is how it happens.
How do you break the cycle?
We can't break it, and that's the hard part. The person has to break it. So, we really focus on the children, because that's where you want to break the cycle. What we have found is that people who have had some kind of success in their life, where they had some power, say, a good example is somebody who maybe didn't grow up in a domestic violence home and got an education and had a job where they were making some money, got into a domestic violence relationship, got really netted up into that, drug use, all that kind of stuff, and at some point realized, wait a minute, I've lost this thing out here that I had that was so important to me. Those are the people that are really able to pull themselves out and decide, I'm not doing this anymore. But I mentioned it's like an addiction. It's very hard not to just, okay, I'm gonna do this now. I'm not gonna go back. And then the person says, oh, I'm really sorry, it's gonna be different. And then you're whoop, over there again, because that's what you love. So it's up to the person. They have to make the choice. Sometimes, just like with addiction, they have to hit bottom and lose everything before they realize this is not good for me. This is not gonna work. But it's really hard, and that's what staff have to let go of, is I can't change this person. I can only give them the tools to help them change, and then support them in their decisions, show them that they have power in their life.
And without naming the staff member, some have direct experience with that, and are able to share that with people going through the same thing. And I can't think of anything much more powerful than that.
Yeah.
For someone who has broken that cycle and made that decision, to be able to say, hey, I was there, and this is what I did. I know it wasn't easy, but I was able to do it, and now I'm happy again, or at least I'm living a healthy
Yes,
life.
absolutely. And I think that really helps some of our clients to see somebody sitting in front of them that is in a safe place, in a good place in their life, and say, I've been through this. Oh, well, maybe there's hope.
I've always wondered, is it safe to be in that area? Because it seems like if someone really wanted to hurt you, couldn't they just climb over the fence? How do people kind of have that feeling of security?
Are you asking if it's safe at the shelter,
At the
or if
shelter.
it's safe to do this work?
At the shelter.
Okay.
No, I'm not too worried about you.
Oh, thanks.
I wouldn't mess with you.
We have a lot of security measures around the shelter. We do have a fence, but it is only, a fence. We have cameras, and we can monitor the shelter 24/7. So myself, the shelter manager, and the direct services manager have iPads, and so anytime, night or day, we can check and see what's going on. We do have night staff that are there, and we have what we call the panic button. So if something happens, we push that button, and law enforcement is immediately alerted. And since we are right up the hill from the sheriff's department, the response time is pretty quick.
Pretty darn good.
Yeah, so we really haven't had a lot of problems. I think that for a shelter that's supposed to be confidential, I don't think it really, I think, most people in San Andreas know where it is, but I think the people around us watch, and, with the other measures in place, we've been lucky so far and haven't had any issues. And if somebody really, if their batterer is really looking for them and we feel like it's too dangerous for them to be there, we're going to move them. So we would put them in another county or somewhere else like that.
Good, good. You mentioned that there have been some changes to the program, namely with, was it with restraining orders? Or
With
anything?
restraining orders. So until tomorrow, well, as of today, we had done assistance with domestic violence restraining orders has been free. And what that entails is filling out the application, making all the copies, taking the application to court, bringing it back from the court, doing the serving papers, going to the hearing, all that kind of stuff has been free. And what we're finding is that it is so time intensive that we're not able to really pay for all that time with our grant funding. And so what we're going to propose, what we are doing, not proposing, as of tomorrow, we'll be charging $20 for that service if somebody wants us to do their application for them and do all this footwork for them. I can tell you that an attorney usually charges $600 for the same service, so $20 is still a bargain. If somebody has been in a situation where they've called law enforcement and law enforcement has done an emergency protective order for them, we will waive the $20 fee, because at that point we know this is really important that this get done. Not that it's not important if they don't have the emergency protective order, but that's an agreement we made with law enforcement. If somebody can't pay the $20, they will receive a packet with detailed instructions on how to do the restraining order application, and we'll go ahead and check it for them and educate them on the court process. We're just not going to fill out the paperwork. So that's going to be a change, and I think that probably people will be a little upset at first, but they have to understand that it is a lot of work.
Absolutely, and once again, your funding comes through grants, but even with those two big grants, you always are looking to get donations.
Exactly.
Are you doing any kind of fundraisers or anything like that?
You provide these great segues for me. So the Resource Connection is, I just talked about all the different programs that we have, and the Resource Connection itself is all grant funded. So every program that I just talked about is grant funded. We don't just automatically get any funding. And so what we are doing is embarking on a Text to Give campaign for the Resource Connection. So people can text connect to, I have to look because I always get the number wrong, and it's written small. So text connect, CONNECT, to 20222. And what that does is it gives a tax-deductible $10 donation to the Resource Connection. And it supports all the programs of the Resource Connection. So each of us have our own funding sources, and they're restricted funding. They can only be used for certain things. So there are things within all programs that our grant funding can't pay for, and that's what this money will